When I was younger, I worked for a short time as a teacher's aide in Orange County School District. My tenure was cut short after I was caught snorting lines of blow in one of the classrooms during recess. Originally, they weren't going to fire me and offered me to go to rehab instead, but being a young man in my 20s, I wasn't ready to let go of my cocaine habit and parted ways. One of the most common questions I get asked during my tenure there is whether or not it's true if we use litter boxes for students who identified as cats. And the answer is 100% absolutely yes. And there's a good reason for that. At our school, we believed in being there for our children and accommodating their needs. Whether they identified as trans, they, them, gender fluid, cats, dogs, it didn't matter. We were there for them. We made some cuts to the English department and hired a specialty janitor and a cat trainer for the students who identified as cats. We would put one litter box in each of the bathroom because cats obviously can't read or tell symbols. And when the cat identifying student had to go to the bathroom, the specialty janitor, the trainer was separate, that was for teaching. The specialty janitor would walk with them to the bathroom, make sure no one else would go in there because cats are skittish, and let them do their business, give it a couple minutes, go in there, scoop the poop, and the bathroom's open to everyone again. It's very clean and sanitary. For the students who identified as dogs, it was a little bit different. We had to make some cuts to the math department and hired a dog walker and a dog trainer. When it came time for them to go to the bathroom, the dog walker would attach a leash to them, take them out back, and let them go behind a bush or behind a tree. If they went number one, we'd let the yellow mellow. If they went number two, they would scoop up the poop, put it in the bag, and throw it away, just like any other dog. Things got a little bit hairy later in the year when one of the students in the first grade class flung a piece of poop at another student. They had to go to the principal's office, and it was later discovered that this particular student identified as a chimpanzee. So we had to make further accommodations. We made more cuts. We fired teachers. We made some cuts to the computer lab, the library, gym. Monkey trainers are not cheap. So we hired a monkey trainer and we installed a giant cage in the classroom to make sure that the child was well accommodated. And before anyone said that, oh, this is a form of abuse, putting a kid in a cage, blah, 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 that kid was well fed. We gave him bananas, grapes. He had water. Is treated like $1 million. So the moral of the story is don't trip people. We are there for the children, or I'm in a different profession now, obviously, but I still believe children are the future and we should be there to accommodate them and, nurture them so they can grow up to be well-rounded adults. And that's all. Hey, what's up everyone? So in my last video, I talked about my brief tenure as a teacher's aide for the Orange County School District and the use of litter boxes in our school. Today, I'm going to answer another very common question I get asked about my tenure as a teacher's aide, and that is, what is up with Drag Queen Story Hour, and is this even a thing? And the answer to that question is 100% absolutely yes. And let me be the first to tell you that Drag Queen Story Hour is lit. Literally the best day as a teacher's aide at that school. Best day ever. So before I go into the deets, let me fill you in on a little backstory. When I started as a teacher's aide at this school, they just bumped up the Drag Queen Story Hour visits from 2 times a year to 4 times a year. They decided, and they, being the school board, decided to make additional cuts to external field trips going to the museum, the planetarium, the zoo, and a couple other places, as they felt that the students weren't really learning much in these environments and would benefit a lot more from additional Drag Queen Story Hours. So being a teacher's aide, I wasn't able to attend the majority of the story hours. Mrs. Harris would usually go up with the first grade class and I would stay behind in the room, organize her desk, clean the classroom, and maybe grade a few papers for her. It sucked. However, one day during Pride Month, Mrs. Harris had a dentist appointment, so I was the one in charge of bringing the kids to the story hour. So with it being Pride Month, we just got finished watching Brokeback Mountain with both first grade classes. I handed out all the rainbow pride flags, gathered all the kids together, and brought them upstairs for story hour. Once again, the best day working at that school. So we started out with Boozy Drag Queen Bingo, which was a total blast. And we didn't give the kids any alcohol, of course, but me and Anastasia, that was a drag queen, by the way, me and Anastasia, we got turned up. We were smashed. And the kids had fun playing bingo too. They didn't even notice that we were drunk. They just thought we were being silly and goofy. Then we did a twerking contest, which again, it sounds worse than it was. Again, totally innocent. We listened to a censored version of WAP by Cardi B. I do remember Stephanie McAllister. She killed it in that contest. Me and Anastasia were both like, girl, what? And then after the twerking contest, that's when the drag queen would read a book to the kids, which I'll admit was the most boring part of the whole experience. But after that, that's when we did the gender swap exercise. And that was my most pivotal moment as a teacher's aide at that school. So gender swap exercise was all the boys dress as girls and all the girls dress as boys. Most of the students were on board with this. Cool, no problem, except for one student, little Benny Cooper. So I sat down with Benny and asked him why he didn't want to participate, and he explained to me that it was because of his religion. So I asked him what religion he believed, and he told me he was a Christian and he believed in Jesus. Admittingly, I don't know much about the Torah, but working for a public school system, you do have to know a little bit about everything. So I tried to relate with him the best I could. And I explained to him that Jesus wore a dress. And he said, no, he didn't. And I said, I got receipts, boy, let me show you. So I pulled out my phone, showed him pictures of Jesus. What is Jesus wearing? A dress. He tries to make up some gibberish word like tunic, I don't know. But at our school, we spoke two languages. First, Spanish, second, English. And I know whatever word that came out of that little boy's mouth was neither one of those. So after explaining that to him, he asked me, why didn't Jesus wear makeup? Why didn't Jesus shave? And, I'm pretty exhausted from all the questions at this point, but, I'm doing my best to answer them. So I told him that Jesus was a very selfless person, and he probably gave away all his makeup products to the lepers. And he probably gave away all of his razors to Judas because he knew things were going to get hairy with him later down the road. Also, back then, everything was run by Republican fascists and people were pretty much locked up in cages and couldn't be themselves. So it took a little bit more convincing, but I finally got that boy in a dress. And not only was it my proudest moment, but I was actually rewarded by the school. So as a teacher's aide, I made peanuts. I made more working at McDonald's, to be honest. But for getting that little boy in a dress, they gave me a $1,000 bonus, gave me a paid week off, and made me employee of the month. How freaking cool is that? Now, yeah, his mom did come into the school the very next day and shoot everyone's head off, pulled the kid out of the school. We had to call the cops on her. It was this big, ugly scene, but they still didn't take away my bonus. They didn't take away my reward, and they didn't take away my paid week off. So super cool. But yeah, moral of the video is Drag Queen Story Hour is no big deal at all. It's very beneficial for your children, and trust the school, okay? We are really trying hard to turn your kids into well-rounded adults. Just trust the process. Hey everyone, what's up? So as previously discussed, I worked for a short time as a teacher's aide for the Orange County School District. In my last two videos, I went over the use of litter boxes in our school, as well as what really goes on during Drag Queen Story Hour. Today, I'm going to be covering two topics. These are also questions that I was frequently asked about during my tenure as a teacher's aide, and that is, what is up with diversity, inclusion, and CRT? Are those even a thing? And the answer to that question is 100% absolutely yes. So let's start with diversity and inclusion. On the first day of school, we would hand out an index card to all the students. We had them write down their first and last name, their age, and the gender they identified as. All of our classroom mostly identified as the gender they were assigned at birth, with the exception of 2 students who identified as cats, which is why we put in the litter boxes. Now, the state offered a special funding allocation for diversity and inclusion if our school had at least 4 students who identified as non-binary or trans. Our school had 3. So I took it upon myself to really pay attention to the kids in the class and see if I noticed anything questionable. Well, there was one student in particular, Jessica Toomey, who would always come to school in baggy clothes. They would always play and hang out with the boys, and they didn't act very feminine. So I sat Jessica down one day and I asked them if they truly identified as a girl. And they told me that yes, because her mommy and daddy said so. So I put a stop in that right there. I explained to Jessica, I said, first of all, your mommy and daddy aren't here. Their opinions don't matter. You are in public school right now. You are in a safe haven and a safe place to express your individuality and identify as whatever gender you want to identify as. So they continued to insist they were a girl, and I cut them off again, and I explained that I don't think you're a girl. I don't think you're a boy either, but I think you're non-binary. So I think it would be in the school's best interest and your best interest if we could update your pronouns to they, them. Thankfully, Jessica agreed, and they went by Jess for the rest of the year, updated their pronouns to they, them. We got the bonus, and did I get a kickback? No, but I felt like a really good person. I did a good thing. So with pronouns, we took them very, very seriously. On every quiz, test, and paper, the students were required to write their first and last name as well as the pronouns that they identified as. If the paper was missing the pronouns, the student would get auto-failed and get a big fat 0. Now, it didn't matter because no child left behind. They're going to be advanced anyway, but it was more of a symbolic gesture. So yeah, that's pretty much it with diversity and inclusion. Now, CRT, that stands for critical race theory. So this was a project we worked on all of January. So I remember week 1, we would separate the white students from the minority students. And we really hammered in on the white students. We explained to them what white privilege was, how they've all been granted this since birth. We went over slavery with them, segregation, police brutality, and general racism. Like, we broke those kids down. But it was a good thing. We opened their eyes big time. And hopefully, because of that CRT training going forward, racism will not be a thing in the future. A couple other projects we did during that course was we did a movie week. We watched Roots, which took 3 days because it's really long. We watched Amistad, and then we watched Boys in the Hood. Now, immediately, Boys in the Hood doesn't have too much historical context, but it's a damn good movie. And at the very least, it did highlight a lot of struggles that Black youth were going through at the time, and still do to this day. So another project we did an oppressor-oppressed swap where we would have all the minority students eat in the cafeteria with the rest of the students, and they would get whatever they want. Pizza, tacos, chicken. They could even have ice cream. They were treated like royalty. Meanwhile, we put all of the white students in one of the classrooms that was in the middle of getting renovated, so there was sawdust and crap everywhere. But they would just get bowls of oatmeal. Then at recess, we would take all of the white students and we would put them into a chain gang. So that was basically just shackling them all together. So if one at the end tried to run one way, they're taking the rest with them, and vice versa. So we put them all in a chain gang, and we had them go around the entire school and pick all the weeds. And the point of this exercise was for them to fully empathize with the atrocities and horrible things that their ancestors did to the minority kids' ancestors. But all in all, it was a very good lesson. I was personally the biggest fan of the chain gang because we did save a week's worth of gardener pay. We had a gardener come to school and pick the weeds. We gave them the week off, and we used that money to buy more booze during Drag Queen Story Hour, so we benefited from it greatly, so that was cool. But all in all, don't trip people. CRT and diversity inclusion are very good things for your kids, and just trust the schools. They're trying to turn your precious little angels into well-rounded adults, and you just have to go with it.
Happy Women's History Month, women! Woo! Seriously though, you are amazing. You are woman. I hear you roar. And let me tell you, when I was a teacher's aide for the Orange County School District, we took Women's History Month very seriously. We went over topics such as the women's suffrage movement, women's lib. We talked about famous feminist icons such as Gloria Steinem, RGB, Hillary Clinton, and even Madonna. Those little girls in our first grade class felt empowered, and we made them feel like rock stars. We even took our very first field trip of the year during that month. Now, I know you're thinking that March is probably a little bit late to be taking field trips, but because of all the cuts in funding that I mentioned in my previous videos, this was all we could afford, and it was for a good purpose. It was very educational. So we decided to take the first grade class out to Planned Parenthood. Now, since it was 2 blocks away and we weren't planning on spending the whole day there, we decided to bypass getting permission slips and just figured all their parents would be on board with it. When we got to Planned Parenthood, we taught the kids about prophylactics, safe sex, STIs, birth control, you name it, we managed to fit it in that 2-hour block. Now, I was really pushing for the abortion doctor to allow us in the room while he was performing a live abortion, just so the little girls in our class could get a feel for it and be more comfortable about it when they get older. Unfortunately, due to HIPAA laws, we weren't allowed to go in there while an actual abortion was being performed. But when the room was empty, we went in there. The doctor explained how each tool worked. The children got to play with the little vacuum thingy, which they had a lot of fun with. And all in all, it was a very educational field trip. Now, things got a little hairy when we left the building. We were confronted by the pro-life mob, and they were screaming and yelling at us. Me and Mrs. Harris, so we went in. We started cussing them out, screaming at them right back. Unfortunately, the children were very scared and confused, so we had to explain to them in the bus on the way back that this group of people are the group of people that want you to carry your rapist babies. And of course, that brought up the question, what is rape? So we didn't have very much time that day left, so I thought, the next day I'm going to bring in a video to show you guys what rape is all about. So the next day I brought in a movie, some of you may have heard of it, it's called The Last House on the Left. There was also a remake in the early 2000s, but that kind of glosses over the rape scene. So I really wanted to show them the original 70s version so they can get a full feel of what rape actually is. Now, admittingly, the movie's not very appropriate for children, so we did skip over a lot of the content, but we did watch the rape scene in full. And there were a lot of questions, me and Mrs. Harris did our best to answer them. And we said it straight. We let the girls know that 25% of you in this classroom right now will grow up to be raped. And we told the boys that 50% of you will grow up to be rapists. Hard truth, but the younger they swallow the jagged little pill, the better. The easier it goes down when they grow up. So not even a week later, and this is a really good example of how we back our women at school. Not even a week later, little Thomas, don't call me Tommy Morgan, who was this little petulant, pretentious, entitled white boy with rich parents and thought his shit didn't stink because mommy and daddy had money. Well, Thomas, one day I caught him kissing the hand of little Beth Stevens. I walked over there and asked what the hell was going on. Beth explained that Tommy said this is what gentlemen do. And I asked Beth, I said, did you give him consent to kiss you on the hand? And she said, well, he said, this is what gentlemen do. I said, okay, stop right there. This is called gaslighting. Thomas gaslighted you to sexually assault you. You are a victim of sexual assault. Beth started crying because, she was finally letting her feelings out. She knew what was going on. And I dragged Tommy's, I don't care, Tommy, fuck him. I'll call him whatever I want. I dragged Tommy's ass down to the principal's office. We got that little boy expelled and he had to register as a sex offender. So women, don't worry. Your kids in school are great. We definitely take care of your little girls. We make sure that they grow up to be well-rounded women. And again, happy Women's History Month, and I hope everyone has a great day today.